I'd like to pick up on the point made by Dr. Nabarro. I mean, it's a given that good nutrition in the first 1,000 days of a child brings down infant mortality, and good nutrition for pregnant women and lactating mothers brings down maternal mortality. And we also know from the Lancet series that it also sort of does wonders for a country's GDP. And 70% of the world's developing countries' population depend on grow their own food. So why are the stakeholders? Why shouldn't that be enough to prompt countries to take action? Where do you think the problem is? If Professor, if you could start, maybe.
Yes, it should be. It should be. The problem, of course, is that policymakers are faced with a number of competing priorities. And the impact of improving the lives of the kids during the first 2 years is not going to show up during the time the politician is in power. In most cases, well, there are exceptions. There are some politicians who actually stay in power in a different generation. But they can't be sure that they're going to be in power 25 years from now when this child is having a higher productivity. So I think governments tend to focus on things that have short-term effect. And investments in improved nutrition of 0 to 2-year-olds and pregnant women takes a very long time before it shows up in productivity increases. That's one of the problems. There are other problems, lack of knowledge. I'm not sure how many policymakers really do understand and agree that by investing in the well-being of pregnant women and children during their first 2 years of life really would have a significant impact on productivity and on the well-being of these kids later on in life. Policymakers are not bad. Let's make sure policymakers are just as good as anybody else, but they have to make priorities. They have to make decisions.
Dr. Branca, would you like to?
We actually in WHO performed recently an analysis of food and nutrition policies globally, and I'd like to reinforce what Per says. Definitely, since 1992, there's been a great effort to actually develop food and nutrition policies, and most countries do have them. But they're not comprehensive often, so they only address part of the spectrum. And the implementation, of course, is a main issue. So we have, although we know what interventions to implement, and you quoted the Lancet series, we perhaps do not think enough of the different interventions in the other sectors in nutrition. So we have, I think, a poor understanding of what we want to ask the agricultural sector from the health point of view or from the nutrition point of view. And then there is the whole issue of implementation. And often we have a problem of implementation that is not aligned between the national and the district. We have a problem of sufficient capacity and quality of implementation. So we have to consider that and think in terms of investment, not only in financial, but in human resources. Capacities are the greatest asset that the country can have to push the agenda.
Dr. Nabarro, you have to sort of engage with country governments, and what sort of responses do you get? And you've had some good success with Malawi and Ghana, Vietnam, Thailand.
Right, okay. Well, first of all, I'd like to share with you that I think that there are many governments, and particularly heads of governments and heads of state, who now in 2011 believe that to have a population that is healthy and well-nourished is a key part of national development. I mean, that is something that was not necessarily the case 50 years ago, even 20 years ago. But this has become much more central in political thinking, perhaps as a result of issues like the Millennium Development Goals coming higher up the political profile, but also as a result of evidence that suggests that an unhealthy population is unproductive and also unsettled and occasionally prone to get agitated. So I think to make the case very strongly that this is an issue that matters, and then to have a group of political leaders who believe that is key. Number two, there is now a much bigger group of supporters in the public sector, private sector, non-governmental community, who are prepared to make this case strongly with additional material. The power of civil society to back up the case is much, much greater now than ever before. Thirdly, we've got some strong propositions to show that came through, for example, in the IFPRI Millions Fed series, or some of the recent work by Gates Foundation, demonstrating that there are doable things. And number four, we're trying to pull together our various international and regional institutions so that they offer a much more unified group that are worth dealing with and engaging with. I think when those of us internationally are fragmented, we're very unattractive. But when we work together, we are almost beautiful. So thank you.
Right. There's another point I'd like to pick up on what Professor Pinstrup-Anderson raised. You said, you know, should countries, there are many countries who have not even been able to get anywhere near the MDG of halving hunger. Should they be paying attention to increasing food production, or should we be paying attention to quality food? To getting people access good quality food. I mean, given, you know, these are sort of recessionary times and governments only have so much money and they need to prioritize. What do you think? Do we need to rethink, or how do you sort of?
I think what's critically important is that the solutions are designed on the basis of a clear understanding of the problem. So we don't end up having solutions looking for appropriate problems. And unfortunately, there's quite a bit of this going on, not just internationally, but nationally as well. So the answer to your question, I think, is let's make sure we understand what the problem is. Yesterday, somebody from an audience in one of the side events, and unfortunately I didn't catch the name, said, look, if you want to find a person who combines health, nutrition, and agriculture, go to the single woman who is a farmer and a mother. She does that. Maybe that's where we ought to start, and then work backwards from the constraints that these individuals have, and then design solutions in that fashion. I think that's the way we need to do it. The point I was making before is there is a tendency now to focus on solving the problem that the world is running out of food. Well, let me assure all of you, the world is not running out of food. That is not the problem. The problem is that a lot of people don't have access. And let me give you an illustration of the difference in terms of interventions depending on which of those two problems you think is the correct one. The land acquisition in parts of Africa by middle-income countries and multinational corporations, sometimes referred to negatively as land grabbing, will most likely increase global food production by pushing out small farmers who do not have, who live on this land, but who do not have access to credit, to technology, to markets, and to, for that matter, anything else that would make it possible for them to increase production. In comes capital-intensive investments in those large chunks of land, and food production is going to go up, probably double or triple. Wonderful. We achieved the goal we wanted to achieve. We're going to produce more food, but guess what? There will be millions of people who are now food insecure who were not food insecure before. It's those kinds of trade-offs we need to worry about.
But
yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not really sure whether we have this divide between quantity and quality. I think it's a common problem. I think we need to understand how we want to see the food system moving. And there are parts of the world where this is happening very quickly. I mean, we have the whole Eastern Europe. We have this part of the world which is moving extremely quickly. So there are forces of the market also which are shaping this evolution. Can we add a health concern to this? So the issue is not really, let's prioritize. The issue is having a comprehensive approach and countries that are now seeing this increase in non-communicable disease also understand that their labor force cannot be affected so dramatically by non-communicable diseases. There is an enormous cost to development. Families who are affected by diabetes, for example, have to go off by cancer, have to go to the healthcare with very high costs, so they are actually driven into poverty by non-communicable diseases. So if we shape the food system in a way that actually we are able to prevent this trend, then we are actually contributing overall to development.
Okay, Dr. Nabarro, maybe also you would like to address whether the health sector should maybe be talking to agriculture a lot more to help shape.
Thank you very much indeed.
Yeah.
These are really dense questions that you're asking, and the time is short.
Okay, right.
But I think if colleagues who are here in the room perceive that actually what we're discussing is really what not only this whole conference is about, but actually what those of us who are looking at the future of agriculture are pondering almost on a daily basis, then the fact that we're just scratching the surface so superficially perhaps won't irritate people too much. I was very struck recently at a meeting in the Global Commodities Forum in Geneva when listening to a presentation from the head of the International Grains Council. I looked at patterns of coarse grain production over the last 10 years, how they have changed, and also what the trends are for the future. Well less than half of the total world coarse grain production is consumed by human beings. More than the amount consumed by humans is consumed by animals, and that has been increasing significantly in the last 10 years. But the fraction of the production that's been increasing most rapidly is the production that goes into biofuels, and that's suddenly shot up in the last 3 or 4 years. So anybody who suggests that there is somehow a shortage of grain in the world and that is impacting on human well-being has got it wrong. In fact, the proportion of the total world grain that is consumed by humans has stayed relatively static over the last 10 years. And we've been looking at food prices over the last 6 months, and they've been increasing month on month. And it's particularly maize and wheat prices that are increasing. But it's not fundamentally because there's an imbalance between the demand by humans and the supply available for humans. It's because of other uses of that food. So that does bring us to the question, what is the purpose of agriculture? Why are farmers doing what they're doing? Why are ministries of agriculture doing what they're doing? I would put it to all of you that I think agriculture is fundamentally not concerned with feeding humanity. It's certainly not concerned with making sure that all of humanity has enough to eat or has the right nutrients to consume. And the purpose of this meeting, and the thing that I believe we're all engaged in here, and that many of this room are involved in, is trying to encourage those who are involved in agricultural policy to rethink what they're up to. And if they did, that might also perhaps reduce some of this use of food as a financial investment tool for people who want to make money, because that's another factor that is impinging on the whole area of food. I see agriculture as an incredibly powerful means to reduce poverty and improve the living standards of people, and that will have a direct impact on people's health. I've seen that with my own eyes year in, year out, that rural communities are just not benefiting from investment, and that in turn is impinging on the health and well-being of women, children and men. Secondly, investing in agriculture helps to create resilient livelihoods that can cope with shocks. And we've seen much of the research that myself and colleagues have done, that often it's a shock in the rural household that leads directly to illness and to increased mortality rates. Thirdly, investing in agriculture properly will lead to sustainable environments with carbon capture, nitrogen fixation, and less use of investments, less use of water. That too will improve human health, but it will also have a remarkable impact on the future of our planet. And the proper investment in agriculture will, of course, lead to better nutrition. So I would say these are hugely important decisions that have impact on human health, human nutrition, and they need to be the focus of our attention during the next 3 days.